Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal, reviving the American economy from financial chaos. In late October 1929, the stock market of the United States experienced its most devastating collapse in history. The country immediately went into a period of economic chaos which lasted for 10 years and is now known as the Great Depression. From that erupted one of America's greatest leaders, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Without the leadership of Franklin Delano Roosevelt during the Great Depression, many more Americans would have been poor, bankrupt, and in a state of turmoil. The establishment of agencies that provided work relief while helping the American economy as part of the New Deal aided the oppressed residents of the United States. It all began on July 2, 1932. On this day, Roosevelt accepted the presidential nomination to run for office, and he stated his first promises to the American people. At the end of the speech, he declared his most important vow, quote, I pledge myself, a new deal for the American people. Let us all here assembled constitute ourselves prophets of a new order, of competence and of courage. This is more than a political campaign. It is a call to arms. Give me your help, not to win votes alone, but to win in this crusade to restore America to its own people. This quote would set the rhythm of what would happen in the coming years. After a landslide victory in the 1932 presidential election, people were counting down the days until FDR's inauguration. The pressure on Roosevelt's back was immense. The people wanted many things to be fixed early, such as unemployment, taxation, war debts, and farm relief. On March 4, 1933, Roosevelt was officially inaugurated as president. The Americans were hooked on this idea of his New Deal. But what exactly was it? The New Deal was a plan to boost the drowning economy as quickly as possible. The plan consisted of 4 major goals: economic recovery, job creation, civic uplift, and investment in public works. These goals were acted upon immediately in what became known as the 100 Great Days. During these 100 days, Roosevelt's administration passed more legislation than others had passed in 8 years. This began with the Emergency Banking Act, which was the first bill sent to Congress by FDR. It gave the government the ability to inspect the nation's banks and declare if they were financially secure for business. After a 4-day bank holiday with intense inspection, 5,000 banks passed the inspection and could reopen. On March 12, 1933, FDR delivered his first of many weekly radio broadcasts called Fireside Chats. In this first chat, he explained why banks were closing as part of the Emergency Banking Act, and that it was necessary if they wanted to keep the banks running in the future. New Deal reforms. Over a 6-year period, from 1933 to 1939, over 20 New Deal reforms were established with the purpose of freeing America from its economic crisis. One of the first reforms established by FDR during the 100 Great Days was the CCC, or Civilian Conservation Corps. Its goal was to provide employment and wages to the people while also helping and improving the environment. The CCC hired men aged 17 to 28 years old to work in national parks and forests. Their jobs consisted of planting trees, fighting fires, improving beaches and campgrounds, building ranger stations or lookout towers, building roads, and working on flood control. Hundreds of recreation areas and wildlife refuges in use today were created by the workers of the CCC. The members of the CCC earned $1 a day, plus room, board, and clothing. Even with all of the work that the members had, they still had time for leisure activities. One of these activities was mini basketball seasons between teams of workers. 2.5 million men served in the Corps until it disbanded in 1942 due to World War II. Overall, the CCC had a positive impact on those who joined. Thousands were taught how to read and write, and some even went off to college. The AAA, or Agricultural Adjustment Act, was one of the most controversial agencies established by FDR. It paid farmers not to grow crops until the prices for them increased. Opponents of the act challenged it in court. In 1936, the Supreme Court ruled that the AAA was unconstitutional and ordered that it be terminated. The NYA, or National Youth Administration, was established in 1935, and it allowed 2 million high schoolers and college students to complete their education. Under this agency, the students were paid as part-time workers in libraries. The students could also work part-time as research assistants. Without the help of the NYA, many students would have been forced to drop out of school. The FDIC, or Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, was a reform established on June 16, 1933, as part of the Banking Act of 1933, which followed up on the Emergency Banking Act. The FDIC was given the authority to regulate and supervise banks in the Federal Reserve System and to provide deposit insurance to the banks. The FDIC is still in existence today. The TVA, or Tennessee Valley Authority, began when Nebraska Senator George Norris saw potential in the poor Tennessee Valley area and wanted to revive an abandoned hydroelectric power complex and munitions plant. The goal of this reform was to provide electricity, development, and economic relief to the Appalachian Mountain region centered on Tennessee. Dams and reservoirs were built to control flooding in the Tennessee Valley. These dams generated hydroelectric power, which was sold to the people of this region. Hydroelectric power was used to power community refrigerators, which held food for the region. This power was also used to light large lamps near barns. The dams were very successful, and 42 dams were built in 7 different states due to the Tennessee Valley Act. Around the reservoirs, areas for boating, fishing, and camping were developed for recreation. As a whole, the Tennessee Valley Authority was extremely successful. It revived the region's economy. The cheap electricity brought over industries and created jobs for the unemployed. Improvement of navigation on the Tennessee River allowed for shipping ports to spring up. By 1940, the demand for electrical power allowed the TVA to build steam generating facilities. By 1960, it was the largest producer of electrical energy in the country. Today, 29 hydroelectric dams are on the Tennessee River and its tributaries, and the TVA is still the nation's leading producer of electricity. The NLRB, or National Labor Relations Board, was established by the National Labor Relations Act, which is better known as the Wagner Act. This act guarantees that employees have rights to organize unions and engage in collective bargaining with their employers. The NLRB conducted elections when workers wanted to choose a union that would represent them, such as in this photograph. This agency also prohibited employers from interfering with union organizing activities. The agency is still functioning today. After the 100 Great Days, there was still a lot of controversy regarding FDR's New Deal. But then, Roosevelt established one of his most important programs of the New Deal, Social Security. The idea of Social Security was taxing the rich, controlling banks, and providing work relief to the unemployed. In the program, the government would take special taxes out of workers' wages. In return, the workers received monthly benefits if they retired or became disabled. If the worker died before they received any benefits, then the benefits went to the family. Social Security is still around today, mainly providing benefits for retired workers. The WPA, or Works Progress Administration, was FDR's most well-known New Deal reform. Roosevelt signed an executive order in 1935 which established this agency, and soon became the largest federal employment program as part of the New Deal. Most of the WPA's projects included manual labor. The projects consisted of highway construction, reforestation, and slum clearance. Smaller WPA programs were organized especially for unemployed writers, artists, and musicians. Writers wrote nonfiction books and guides for every state and territory. The artists painted murals on walls of post offices, schools, and federal buildings. Actors, singers, and other musicians brought plays and concerts to people who had never seen live performances. Some other jobs done by WPA workers were digging ditches and building playgrounds, hospitals, stadiums, and schools. They also translated millions of pages into Braille and recorded folk tunes. Even though the WPA provided the most work out of all the New Deal agencies, criticism was inevitable. The term boondoggling was coined to describe the agency's projects to make work as a waste of money. Yet, in 8 years of existence, the WPA spent over $11 billion on its projects and employed 8.5 million people. As a leader, Roosevelt took it into his own hands to employ millions of people and revamp the economy. He signed many executive orders to establish agencies to give work to the unemployed. He provided work to over 12 million jobless Americans. FDR left a huge legacy after the Great Depression. If a financial and economic collapse were to happen today, we would know how to handle it thanks to Roosevelt. His outstanding leadership during the Great Depression allowed a prosperous future for America, which is still reflected upon today by many.